On September the 6th, 2018, on or around 10 p.m., shots rang out from apartment 1478 in Dallas. In the seconds that occurred, one family's light was snuffed out. Another family's hopes and future dreams turned into nightmare. This is Charlie Crimebuster, and this is Crime Talk. Well, good day and welcome to the podcast. We're delighted to have you with us today. A little over a year ago, Botham Jean was shot to death by a cop who was in the wrong apartment. You see, that cop lived in apartment 1378. Botham? Well, he was in apartment 1478. Former Dallas police officer Amber Guyger. She's been sentenced to 10 years in prison for the murder of her former neighbor, Botham Jean, in September of last year. Now, the jury, they deliberated the sentence for about 2 hours. After hearing testimonies from Jean's parents and friends and co-workers who sometimes spoke through tears about the 26-year-old remembered for his academic achievements, his love of devotion to his family, and his love of music. Now, several witnesses also spoke on behalf of Guyger. They included family members, friends, 3 Dallas police officers, and a woman who credited Guyger with helping her, the woman, through her addiction. Now, the jury previously found Guyger guilty of murder on Tuesday, and she was facing 5 to 99 years in prison. Applause could be heard from the audience, and Jean's family, well, they could be seen in tears after the verdict was announced. The jury deliberated Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning over whether Guyger was guilty of murder or manslaughter. When she shot her upstairs neighbor on September the 6th, 2018, Guyger was still in uniform when she fatally shot Jean. She had just ended her shift when she returned to the apartment complex where they both lived in Dallas. Guyger is now the 3rd officer in Dallas County to be found guilty of murder since 2016. That was according to the Dallas Morning News. And a 4th has yet to start trial. Before 2016, it had been 40 years since a police officer faced murder charges in the Dallas area. That's again according to the news. That last one was Darrell Lee Kane. He was convicted of murdering a little 12-year-old boy, Santos Rodriguez. Well, today we're going to discuss lessons learned from this tragedy, along with some other helpful insight into news you can use. Hey, speaking of news, last week's podcast was The Mystery of the Little Boy in a Box, and which I'm happy to say gathered a host of new listeners, a ton of them actually, and still remains a somewhat mystery. Now, we're going to update you on that story in today's program, but first, a new mystery, and a somewhat awkward and weird one. I guess we could call it the mystery of the exploding porta potty. St. Johns County tells us, that's Sheriff Spokesman Chuck Milligan. He said Tuesday that Dennis Victoria McQuagg, 26 years of age, 62 years of age, 62 years of age, lived down the street from the portable toilet. Now, that portable toilet was outside of a home that was under construction. Well, that toilet exploded Saturday morning. Mulligan said the cause of the explosion is still under investigation. He said the bomb squad x-rayed the melted plastic to see if anything was inside. A neighbor called 911 Saturday morning after hearing a big bang. The Florida Times-Union reported that the portable toilet was in flames when firefighters arrived. Once they put out the fire, they found McQuagg's body. Mulligan said that foul play isn't suspected, and it's not yet known why she was in the portable toilet. So at this point, we have the mystery of the exploding porta potty. Can't wait to get your comments on that one. Now, our feature story today is Amber Guyger, Cop to Murderer, Lessons Learned. One of the first lessons that we all can learn, and especially those who are in law enforcement, are those who are concealed carry citizens. That lesson is this, and I cannot emphasize it enough. Our mistakes can take the lives of innocent people. On September the 6th, Botham Jean was sitting in his apartment, eating ice cream, watching television, when Amber Guyger came through his door, thinking it was her own apartment. She drew her service weapon and shot Botham Jean to death. Jean Botham, a young man in the prime of his life. Colin Packer gives us these words about Jean Botham. He says, "Yesterday, I attended the funeral of Botham Jean. It was one of the most moving experiences I have ever had. Botham was a man of God, a graduate of Harding University, a worship leader, and a brother in Christ." He goes on to say, "We shared the same city and the same small religious tribe." A young man shot down in the prime of his life by a police officer who had the wrong apartment. Far too often, we do not realize that the wrong choices that we make impact innocent people. In my book, #SmartCarry, I point the pros and cons of carrying a weapon. While I believe everybody has the right to defend themselves with weapons, I do not believe it is right for everybody to carry. You see, you must realize that with that right comes a tremendous responsibility to train, to carry yourself to a higher standard, and to make smart choices. Now, you may say, I do not carry a weapon, so it really doesn't include me. But how about those times you drank before you drove? Those times you just had to read that text and respond while driving? There are far more people killed by mistakes on the road, my friend, than there are by mistakes made with a firearm. And I'm talking thousands versus hundreds. The lesson we learn is that innocent people are impacted and can even die by the wrong choices we make in life. More lessons in a moment. But let me ask you, did you happen to hear about the newest crime wave? The newest crime wave to hit Central Florida? Well, bet you did, unless your head was buried somewhere in the sand. It's another unusual crime story. It originates from Orlando, Florida. You see, my friend, it seems we've had quite a situation in one of our charter schools in Orlando. A young lady was arrested because apparently her grandmother told her that she could wear her pretty sunglasses at school, which was against school policy. And the young lady's response to school policy, well, it got her cuffed and stuffed, put back into the back of a police car, along with a mug shot. What's unusual about that, you say? Well, would you believe it? Would you believe it if I told you that the young lady was just 6 years of age and was arrested for a temper tantrum? And folks, hey, hang on here, because we just may have some major gang activity at this grammar school. For it is now reported that a second 6-year-old was arrested, and all by the same officer. And you can bet this officer is in a boatload of trouble. Authorities say that a Florida police officer has been fired and is being investigated after arresting 2 6-year-olds for separate incidents at their schools. CBS Orlando affiliate WKMG-TV reported to us that Dennis Turner was previously suspended pending the outcome of an internal investigation by the Orlando Police Department. Now, the arrests were on unrelated misdemeanor charges, that's what authorities said, and all charges against the children have been dropped. Police clarified Monday that both of the children were actually 6 years of age, after initially describing one of them as an 8-year-old, but they were both 6. The department's policy requires that an officer get approval of a watch commander before arresting anyone under the age of 12. WKMG-TV said that didn't happen during last Thursday's arrest. So you're probably thinking, as I was, well, this must be a young rookie. Not so. Officer Turner retired from the Orlando Police Department in 2018, and he was working this gig as a reserve officer. Hey, something else that may surprise you. Stunning annual crime statistics, that's compiled by the FBI, shows us that between 2013 and 2018, which was the most recent year for which complete data is available, that between 2013 and 2018, get this, at least 30,467 children under the age of 10 were arrested in the United States. 30,467. And those numbers skyrocket for children between the ages of 10 and 12. Ages 10 to 12, 266,321 arrested during the same 6-year time span. That's according to data. Now, if you would like to know how that breaks down by year and know how state laws vary regarding these mini adult arrests, I encourage you to go to our resource page at charliecrimebuster.com. We have a link there under the title, The Youngest of Criminals, or maybe Mini Adult Arrests, that will take you to an ABC story that breaks all that down for you. Now, you can also get this material from the show notes under Charlie's shows. Now, back to our feature story. The next lesson that we learned from the shooting of Botham Jean, an innocent man. Number 2, always practice situational awareness. Being aware of your surroundings is a golden rule of personal safety. Unfortunately, no. Now, let me change that. Now, I'm not going to use the word unfortunately. I'm going to use the word tragically. Ex-Officer Guyger failed this one. Oh, there were some circumstances for sure. She had worked over 13.5 hours. She had helped put some bad people away, and after such an adrenaline rush, she was tired for sure. But we're also told about how she was texting back and forth with a partner, a married partner, for whom she had had an affair with, so she was distracted. The bottom line, my friend, is this. If you're wearing the blue, if you're carrying a weapon, then you are to push away distractions. You are to be able to perform your duty in adverse circumstances. Being tired, being distracted, is something you just overcome in a moment of crisis. That is, if you're wearing the blue, or you're carrying a weapon. Well, 25% of those people in that apartment complex admitted to almost making the same mistake of going into the wrong apartment. All the apartments were similar, to be sure. But out of those 25%, not one of them, none of those killed someone. The fact is, we're altogether too distracted in this life today. Hey, you may recall the lady in the mall, remember her, who was so intense on texting? So intense on texting that she fell head first into the fountain in the center of the mall. Then she dared to sue the shopping mall. She said there wasn't any signage. Now, let me ask you, friend, do we really need signs to tell us not to walk and fall head first into a fountain? And then she says that no one helped me, as if she expected the mall to post lifeguards at a fountain in the mall. Well, if they do that, I want that job. Even I could save a few lives and a few feet of water. Folks, the point is, people are killed because of distracted drivers. People walk out in front of moving vehicles because they are distracted. And Botham Jean was shot to death by a distracted off-duty cop who was distracted enough not to notice the wide red carpet before the door of Botham's apartment, nor that she had parked into the wrong parking area. Lesson number 2, always be aware of your surroundings. Now, one of the great things about doing a podcast on crime is that there's always crime. One of the bad things about doing a podcast on crime is, yep, you got it, there's always crime. And one of the weird things about living in Florida is you always have Florida man or Florida woman doing dumb things, which is why we always try to have a crazy crook story in our podcast. However, today's crazy crook story comes not even from the United States. I was somewhat relieved to find that we share dumb crooks of almost all the states, and guess what? They're literally all over the world, because this crazy crook story comes from Australia, down under. You see, one thief got more than they bargained for when he reached into the window of a parked car and snatched a tote. A tote! Now, for us Americans, think pocketbook. Very common item of thieves. But this tote was a little different in its contents. There was something fishy going on. Well, fishy is not quite right. There was a different type of critter, you see. This bag belonged to a professional snake catcher, Brad McDonald, and inside was a highly poisonous snake. McDonald had just captured it from an underground car park in Sydney. Now, can you imagine? Well, our lesson here is simple. Don't leave valuables in your car. unless you happen to have a poisonous snake handy. Wait a minute. I want to take that back. This is America. Chances are, even if you had a poisonous snake in there, well, the crook would turn around and sue you, and then win. Well, if you happen to miss the last podcast, let me encourage you to go to Charlie Crimebuster and click on the show, The Mystery of the Little Boy in a Box. The Little Boy in a Box. You can hear us on iTunes and a ton of other social platforms. Now, we shared last week, cops are being very tight-lipped about the missing parents, along with their friend. And a positive identification at this point in our podcast has not been made. On last week's podcast, we learned a lesson that can protect you and your family. So just to summarize and update you on the mystery of the little boy in a box, know this. Buffalo resident Lois Osberger found a little boy on her porch who was in a box, who kept saying, "The car's on fire, the car's on fire." Police discovered a burned-out car in a wooded area near where the child was found. 2 bodies were found in that car that have not yet been identified. Then police released video of 2 suspects running from the burning vehicle with that child. And neither of the suspects matched the description of the 3 missing adults, the boy's parents and their friend. Police did identify the little boy by posting his photo on social media. And thank God, since then, he's at least found familiar surroundings because he's been turned over to his grandmother here in Central Florida, over 1,200 miles from where he was found, in a box on a stranger's porch. Police are now trying to determine if the couple's friend that came with them up there, if he is connected to the car fire and the disappearance. And there's some other things about this that really catches your attention. It even goes to how some drugs were found in a motel room. Well, all of that and more you can find on last week's podcast, The Mystery of the Little Boy in a Box. We'll keep you updated, and if you missed it, go to charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com, and click on the podcast, Mystery of the Little Boy in a Box. Now for our cybercrime tip. One common crime is the advance fee fraud. You see, these frauds, which are also known as 419 scams, that's after the portion of the criminal code relating to fraud, involving bilking victims out of money by promising them an eventual payoff. In Nigeria, it's called a 419 scam. You see, the scammer will email his victim with news of some financial windfall, often represented as wealth of a distant relative or the remnants of some other illicit fortune. The victim will say then that all the victim needs to do, is to claim the wealth and provide some identifying information, pay a few incidental expenses. And you got it. The lure for easy wealth has found many victims. Some individuals actually lose thousands or even hundreds and thousands of dollars. So beware of the advance fee scam. And also another help. We have posted on the Charlie website at charliecrimebuster.com under the resource page a link to show you how to protect your webcam. You see, often people are unaware of just how easy your webcam can be hacked. Someone could be spying on you, watching you, and you not even know it. So to protect yourself, go to our website, see the ways you can protect your webcam. Don't wait till it's too late for this one. Hey, speaking about computers, from cop to murder, lessons learned. Number 3, social media discipline is of a necessity for all of us, and especially for those who carry a weapon. In my book, #SmartCarry, in the chapter on the aftermath of a shooting, I warn people that you will be put in under a microscope if you're shooting. Even if your shooting was justified, you are going to be put under a microscope. In this tragedy, that warning bears out, and it was not followed by the ex-Dallas cop who had spent 5 years protecting others. In an interview, Jean's family attorney, Lee Merritt, says that there are social media posts of Amber Guyger bragging about being violent. He said she bragged about being violent, being short-tempered. She bragged about the use of force. And folks, as a side note here, I've got to admit, one post I saw said NFL died of colon cancer, a reference to not standing during the national anthem, which can be tied to the Black Lives Matter movement. Now remember, Guyger is a white cop who shot an unarmed, innocent black man. Another post that most would not find offensive, except if you're under a trial for murder. It said this. It shows a SWAT member all rigged up with the caption, "Stay low, go fast, kill first, die last." One shot, one kill. Now, all of these may not matter to you right now and might even motivate SWAT cops and soldiers, unless you are the one that's on trial for a shooting that you've been involved in. Then mark it down. The defense is going to bring that up. Going to make you look like you're one of those people who just want to go around shooting people. You've heard the saying, think before you speak? I'm going to suggest to you a new saying. A new saying. Instead of think before you speak, try this one on. Pause before you post. Pause before you post. Because your posting may say things about you that can be held against you. Hey, there was another tragic case of missing identity that changed a family forever. It's Christopher Bergen. He flew in from Norway to Gulf Breeze, Florida. He was hoping to surprise his father-in-law, Richard Dennis, for Mr. Dennis's 61st birthday. But when Bergen, 37 years of age, arrived, he startled Dennis by jumping out of some bushes in his backyard upon his arrival. And tragically, Dennis shot and killed his son-in-law, thinking he was an intruder. The tragedy unfolded on Tuesday, October the 1st, when Bergen, who was married to Dennis's daughter, who was also a resident of Norway, he landed in Florida about 11 p.m. and headed straight to his father-in-law's house. Bergen had reportedly lived in Florida before returning to Norway. However, unknown to Bergen, about 2 hours before Bergen arrived at Dennis's house, another relative had arrived at Dennis's house and banged on the front door. It startled Dennis. That's what Santa Rosa County Bob Johnson said at a press conference this past Thursday. The unnamed family member and Dennis got into a verbal altercation, and Dennis literally ran that person off. So at 11:30, Mr. Dennis hears the same type of banging on his back porch that he heard on the front porch earlier. So he turns on the back porch light. He steps out, and then Mr. Bergen jumps out of the shadows, scaring Mr. Dennis. And Mr. Dennis gives off one round, striking Mr. Bergen and killing him instantly. Later in the press conference, Johnson said that Dennis was totally startled when Bergen jumped out, and that Bergen had allegedly made a growling noise when he revealed himself. You know how that happens. You try to scare somebody. You're having fun, want to laugh about it, but little did he know that Mr. Dennis was armed and scared. Johnson added that Dennis's bullet, shot from a .380 semi-automatic gun, was a shot that went straight to Bergen's heart. Now, according to the Giffords Law Center, there's about 36,000 Americans that are killed by guns each year, and 487 of those are by accident, unintentional. Sheriff said that the investigation revealed that it was totally accidental. There's no charges warranted in the case. Another tragic. Hey, just a note here, folks, and it's the fourth lesson if you're keeping up with the lessons. You know, there are other weapons that you can use that are not as deadly, especially if you're facing an unarmed attack. Mace. Mace is one of those self-defense weapons. Before the taser, police officers often, and they still use today, they still use mace to subdue a person. Just think about it. What if George Zimmerman had used mace? What if the guy in Clearwater who shot a subject that was retreating from his weapon had used mace? Remember, he later claimed stand your ground, but that did not work for him. He was found guilty of manslaughter. He's supposed to be sentenced this month. You may also recall in an earlier podcast I had reported that I had a problem with this particular shooting even before he was ever charged on the case. When I saw the video, I thought, maybe something's not quite right about that one. I don't believe that's stand your ground. I don't believe he could really justify deadly force. You see, this Clearwater, Florida man who shot an unarmed man, well, he's going to be sentenced in October for manslaughter. But what if he used mace to defend him prior to going to deadly force? And what if Amber Guyger had maced or tasered Botham Jean? Just saying. They would have been much better off, and 3 unarmed people would not be dead. Well, we've got one more lesson. It's the fifth one, and it's a little unusual, but it does bear repeating. Here it is. Are you ready for it? Forgiveness. Forgiveness is not natural, but it can be supernatural. You see, Jean Guyger, she received in a court of law 10 years and 2 hugs. In a court of law, 2 hugs. The first hug was stunning enough that someone called it the hug seen around the world. A young man embracing his brother's killer for nearly a minute in the middle of the courtroom just after telling the woman, "I forgive you. I love you as a person, and I don't wish anything bad on you." That's what 18-year-old Brant Jean assured Amber Guyger. Guyger had said she just aimed to kill out of fear after entering the wrong apartment by mistake. Jurors, though, they thought differently. They said it was murder. And she was hugged by the brother of the man she had killed. Then came another unlikely embrace from the judge in the case that sparked renewed protest as Guyger received a 10-year sentence. With the emotional trial wrapped up, Judge Tammy Kemp walked over in her black robe to give Guyger a Bible. Then she wrapped her arms around Guyger and murmured to her. Together they prayed. Both of those hugs was motivated by their ties to Christianity. Followers of Christ. Christ who said, "Love your enemy, forgive those who have wronged you." Now, regardless of your view of the hug, all would have to admit, it's just not natural for someone to forgive someone for shooting their loved one, even if it was not intended. But there's one thing that's common through both of these hugs. It was all wrapped up. They both were wrapped up in faith. Now, for those who may be religious haters out there, like it or not, faith has made people better. I heard one person say about the brother, "He's a better man than I am." That's true, isn't it? Real faith, rooted in love, often makes us better people. I know that I would not have the power to forgive like that in my own strength, but according to them, it is a supernatural power. It is the power of faith. Interesting, isn't it? We take faith out of our schools, yet ask anybody who works in corrections, and they'll tell you there are usually more Bibles in a jail than they are in some mainline churches. Makes one wonder, doesn't it? If we had more Bibles in the school, would there be less people in jail? Why is that? Because America still believes as a whole that faith can change lives and make people better. 5 lessons we learn from the podcast. Number 1, innocent people die from our bad choices. 2, situational awareness is the golden rule for staying safe. 3, we all need to practice social media discipline. Pause before you post. And the one we added in there was that there are other tools you can use to defend yourself that's not deadly force, particularly if you are facing someone who's not armed or showing deadly force to you. And last but not least, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not natural, it's supernatural. Hey, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share it with others. Help us help others by liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and other social platforms. Let others know about the Charlie Crimebuster podcast. Share it as often as you can. And until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster here reminding you to stay alert, because you can save others and the life you save. Well, the life you save just may be your very own.